Tonight, my talk is on Samatha and Vipassana. This is a sort of continuation from my talk in Ipoh about a month ago, which was called Original and Traditional Buddhism, which lasted for about 3 hours. It was more of a question and answer session, and I took the opportunity to talk a bit about original and traditional Buddhism, and I would like to summarize a bit now what I said there. Basically what I said was that there are a lot of wrong views in Mahayana Buddhism as well as Theravada Buddhism. And in Mahayana Buddhism, I think we don't have to mention that. In Theravada Buddhism, many of the wrong views come from the books that were written later. Because I mentioned that the original books were the 4 Nikayas. Because at the time when the 500 Arahants met, about 3 months after the Buddha's Parinibbana, they only discussed the Vinaya and the 4 Nikayas, that is the Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Sangyutta, and Anguttara Nikaya. And it was later that there was a sudden mushrooming of books written later. And these wrong views were acknowledged even at the time of Emperor Asoka. And so these 4 Nikayas are the really reliable books, the really books that we can say is the Buddha's words. Anything other than that, we have to be very careful. So, in Theravada Buddhism, now we have what they call the Tipitaka or Tripitaka, the 3 treasuries. And they have added the Abhidhamma, which is one of those set of books, 7 books, whose authenticity is controversial. And then we have the Khuddaka Nikaya, and then we have the commentaries, Atthakatha, and then the sub-commentaries, and the sub-commentaries. And beside all these books, there are still others like the Visuddhimagga, Milinda Panha, Netipakarana, Pitako-padesa, and other books which don't even fall into this category, but which some Theravada monks like to read and acknowledge them as the Buddha's teaching, or in conformity with the Buddha's teaching. Now, if all these books are actually in conformity with the Buddha's teaching, there should be no inconsistency, no discrepancy with the 4 Nikayas. But unfortunately, there is. And now in Theravada Buddhism, we have 2 serious, to what I would call wrong views. One is that we acknowledge that there is such a thing as a bodhisattva path, that you can actually become a Buddha by making vows, by cultivating the paramis or paramitas, and then after a long period of time you can become a Buddha. But this has no basis in the 4 Nikayas. And in the 4 Nikayas, there's no mention of the Buddha or the Bodhisattva making a vow before the Dipankara Buddha and meeting 24 Buddhas successively who predicted that he would become a Buddha. Actually, in our 4 Nikayas, he only met one Buddha, that was Kassapa Buddha. And he said he looked back in time as far as 91 Kapas only. And during that period, he said he saw in the past 91 Kapas, 6 Buddhas. So he only mentioned 6 Buddhas' names. And the fact that we say that in the 4 Nikayas, there is no basis for the Bodhisattva belief, the path, is that first, when the Buddha was enlightened, he contemplated the nature of living beings and he decided not to teach. In other words, he was quite determined to be a Pachika Buddha. And only after the Brahma Sahampati, the Deva, came to appeal to him 3 times to teach the Dhamma to the world, that he decided to teach the Dhamma. So from here you can see that basically the wisdom of a Pachika Buddha and a Sammasambuddha is basically the same. It's only whether one wants to teach or one does not want to teach. And in the Nikayas we find that there are times when you can find many Pachika Buddhas in the world. Something like 500 Pachika Buddhas were stated by the Buddha to have lived at Isigili mountain near Rajagaha. So at any one time you can find a lot of Pachika Buddhas compared to a Sammasambuddha, which is extremely rare. And I mentioned that the reason is that it's very difficult to teach something new, something different from what people are used to believe. To change people's views is very difficult. You get persecuted, get abused, and as in the case of Jesus Christ, you even get killed. So the other basis for saying that there is no real Bodhisattva path, there is such a thing as a Bodhisattva groping, because the Bodhisattva is actually groping in the dark. There is no proper path like the Arya. The Arya has got an Aryan eightfold path to follow, a very definite path. Whereas the Bodhisattva, he has no Dhamma base. He does not understand Dhamma, so he is groping. And cultivating all these paramis just brings him up and down in samsara. Sometimes goes up to the heavens, sometimes comes down. So in the Gatikara Sutta, the Buddha did mention that in one of his previous lives, he met the Buddha Kassapa. And when he met the Buddha Kassapa, he had no respect for Buddha Kassapa, refused to go and see Buddha Kassapa until he was pulled by the hair by his friend Gatikara. And finally he went to see the Buddha. And when he saw Buddha Kassapa, also he had no respect. He didn't want to pay any respect to the Buddha Kassapa. And then later, after Buddha Kassapa taught him the Dhamma, he changed completely, made a 180-degree turn, and had so much faith in the Buddha that he was willing to renounce his Brahmin religion and become a monk. And that means at that time the Buddha entered the stream, the Bodhisattva. So after that birth as Jyotipala, the Brahmin, he was reborn in the Tusita heaven. From the Tusita heaven, he came down to earth and became a Buddha. And that is logical. That means after he met the Buddha's teaching, he took another one more time, coming back to earth one more time to become a Buddha. And that's reasonable because the Buddha said a Sotapanna has at most 7 more lives. And these 7 more lives probably means 7 more existences on earth as a human being. So basically that was the first wrong view I mentioned. The second one was that very serious discrepancy now exists concerning Samatha and Vipassana. There is now found a general belief that there are 2 vehicles, what they call Samatha Yanika and Vipassana Yanika. And this has its origin in the commentaries. The commentaries say that in the Nikayas, there are two types of Arahant. One that cultivates Samatha meditation, another one that cultivates Vipassana meditation. And out of this hypothesis, out of this assumption, they have said that this person who cultivates the Vipassana Yanika, he might be enlightened with the 4 jhanas, or 3 jhanas, or 2, 1, or even 0 jhana. Even if he has no jhana, he can still be enlightened. And this has absolutely no basis in the 4 Nikayas. And they call this person the Sukha Vipassaka Arahant. Sukha means dry. It's spelled with a double K, S-U-K-K-H-A. Vipassaka, dry vision Arahant. And this, I like to point out later, how this type of wrong view came about. One was through what I believe is a wrong interpretation of the liberation by mind, or 2 ways liberated Arahant, and liberation by wisdom. So now this view that there is a Samatha Yanika and Vipassana Yanika, once you have this kind of view, then they start differentiating. They say that Samatha Yanika has no wisdom, whereas the Vipassana Yanika is cultivating wisdom. In other words, what they are saying is no different from what the Mahayanas say about Theravada and Mahayana. Basically, that they are Mahayana, the higher vehicle, and Theravada is the Hinayana, lower vehicle. So in the same way, once you separate Samatha and Vipassana, you find people who are attached to Vipassana calling themselves in the same way that they are the Maha. And you who practice the Samatha, you are the Hinayana or Hinayanika. Basically, it's the same thing. Now, one of the suttas that leads to this kind of idea is found in the Anguttara Nikaya. There's one sutta that says 2 things contribute to knowledge. One is Samatha, the other one is Vipassana. Then they say, it's stated there, Samatha, the result of practicing Samatha is development of mind. And the result of development of mind is that lust is abandoned. And the result of abandoning lust is that you get liberation by mind. Then they say that Vipassana leads to the development of wisdom, and which in turn results in ignorance being abandoned, and which in turn results in liberation by wisdom. Now this word Samatha and Vipassana, as I pointed out in my earlier talk in Ipoh, is that Samatha literally means suppression or pacification or tranquilization. So I think the better word to use is tranquilization. It is a process of making your mind tranquil. And this leads to development of mind, which basically means concentration or tranquility. And the result of tranquility, according to this sutta, is that lust is abandoned. Now, Vipassana should be translated as contemplation. But some people, they translate it as insight. And this should not be correct, because the word Vipassana consists of 2 words, Vi and Passana. Vi is a prefix meaning separation. And Passana is to see, to observe. So when you see and you separate, that is contemplation. And the result of practicing Vipassana is development of wisdom, which is basically insight. So, since you practice Vipassana, you can get insight. Vipassana should not mean insight. Vipassana should mean contemplation. And that will lead you to insight. And the result of insight is that ignorance is abandoned. And then you get liberation by wisdom. Now this kind of sutta, if you are not careful, you only study one sutta like this, you will come to the conclusion, according to this sutta, it says that Samatha will give you concentration, and which results in abandoning lust. And then Vipassana gives you development of wisdom, which means insight. And then from this sutta alone, you might think that Samatha does not give you wisdom. Only Vipassana will give you wisdom. But if you study more, there's another sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya that talks about a few types of concentration. And then it says that if you cultivate your mind to be concentrated, and so concentrated until it becomes bright, and not only so, not little bit of brightness, it's very bright, so that your mind becomes very, very bright. That is the best condition for insight, for jnana dasana. In other words, here, this second sutta is saying samatha or concentration will give you insight, which is opposite to what the other one says. And then, in this same sutta, it says that if you contemplate the body, the 32 parts of the body, lust is abandoned. So, in this second sutta, what is the meaning of it is that samatha will give you insight. Contemplation of body or vipassana will make your lust be abandoned, which is quite the opposite of the first sutta, which says that samatha will abandon lust, right? You get development of mind, concentration, then you abandon lust. And then, whereas vipassana gives you insight. So, you see, if you study only one or two suttas, and you don't study enough of the suttas, you can come to the wrong conclusion. Now, if you take these two suttas and compare, you will find that samatha gives you wisdom in one sutta, the other sutta, vipassana gives you wisdom. So how is this to be reconciled? For this now, you have to see another sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, which says that to get Yatta Bhutta Jnana Dasana, seeing things as they really are, there is a condition. It's not simply anybody can get Yatta Bhutta Jnana Dasana, seeing things as they really are. The condition for seeing things as they really are is samadhi. And samadhi is always defined in the suttas, in the four nikayas, as the four jhanas. Sometimes it is defined as one-pointedness, which means jhana, any jhana. Now, the commentary, sometimes they say right concentration can mean momentary concentration. And this has absolutely no basis in our Nikayas. Momentary concentration is not even mentioned at all in the Nikayas, because the Buddha didn't consider it worthwhile mentioning. Why? Because momentary concentration is something that almost everyone has. It's not only when you read a book or you sit down to meditate that you have momentary concentration, All the time you should have momentary concentration, because if you don't have momentary concentration, firstly, you can't even make a proper sentence. Yes or not? To say a sentence that is coherent, that people can understand, you have to be able to place the words in your mind properly and utter them coherently so that people can understand, right? That needs momentary concentration. To eat your food, you need momentary concentration. Otherwise, you cannot put the spoon into your mouth, put it into your nose or put it into your eye, right? To walk straight, you need momentary concentration. Because you can see, a drunkard cannot walk straight. Yes or not? You ask a drunkard to walk straight, he cannot walk straight. Why? Because he's got no control of himself. So momentary concentration is something that we use all the time. That's why in the Buddha's teaching, it doesn't amount to anything. And then in the other talk, I also mentioned that the Aryan right concentration is the jhanas supported by the 7 factors. The other 7 factors of the Aryan Eightfold Path. It's only when the jhanas are supported by the other 7 factors of the Aryan Eightfold Path that it is very useful. Right? Then we use the jhanas in the right way, together with sati, together with right effort and all these things. And we get results in the Buddha's teaching. Now, there are several suttas that affirm that concentration samadhi in the suttas always refer to the 4 jhanas. For example, in the Anguttara Nikaya, there's one sutta that talks about the threefold training. The training in the Adi-sila, the higher morality, the Adi-chitta, higher mind, and the Adi-panya, higher wisdom. There it is defined, the Adi-chitta sikha, the training in the higher mind, is the 4 jhanas. That is definitely stated. Then, there's another sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya that talks about utter purification of mind. And there is defined also as the 4 jhanas. Now, in the Majjhima Nikaya, there's one sutta that talks about the 7 purifications, the Ratta Vinita Sutta. And there they did not define what they mean by the purification of mind. So because it is not defined there are some commentaries that say the jhanas are not necessary. But in the Anguttara Nikaya, it's very clearly stated purification of mind is the 4 jhanas. Now, there are several suttas that confirm that samadhi always refers to the jhanas. For example, in the Majjhima Nikaya, there's a few suttas. There's one sutta where Ananda, I think, was asked, what is that one thing the Buddha taught that is needed to win liberation? And Venerable Ananda said, first jhana. Then that person asked him, is there another thing? Then Ananda said, second jhana. And he said, is there another thing? Third jhana. So is he always talking about jhanas? Then there's another sutta where the Buddha was asked, what is the way to get rid of the 5 lower fetters? When you get rid of the 5 lower fetters, that means you become an anagami. Okay? So the Buddha said the first jhana. And then he was asked whether there's another way. He said the second jhana. Another way? Third jhana. Always jhanas, you see. And then there's another sutta where Ananda was asked, what kind of meditation was praised by the Buddha? What kind of meditation was not praised by the Buddha? And Venerable Ananda said, the kind of meditation where the 5 hindrances are abandoned, that type of meditation is praised by the Buddha, meaning the jhanas. And the type of meditation that is not praised by the Buddha is the type of meditation where the 5 hindrances are not abandoned. That means anything short of the first jhana, or one-pointedness of mind, is not approved by the Buddha. Then there are, for example, others. In Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha says, asava, truly I say, asava destruction depends on the first jhana. Asava destruction depends on the second jhana, etc. Then another Anguttara Nikaya Sutta, the Buddha said, a monk without the peace of concentration in high degree, without winning one-pointedness, that a monk without the peace of concentration in high degree, without winning one-pointedness, shall enter and abide in liberation by mind, liberation by wisdom. That cannot be, the Buddha said. And then there are 2 suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya where the Buddha talked about the threefold training, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. And then the Buddha defined quite clearly, the Buddha said the Sotapanna and the Sakadagamin, the first and second fruition person, has got perfect Sila. That means the 5 precepts, or at least the first 4 precepts are perfect. And then the Buddha said the Anagamin, the third fruition person, has got perfect Sila and Samadhi. When you say perfect Samadhi, that means he has got the jhanas, the 4 jhana. That's why generally all Anagamins are reborn in the 4th jhana plane. And then the Buddha also said the Arahant has got perfect Sila, Samadhi and Panya. That means only the Arahant has got that type of Panya that can bring you out of samsara. And then in the Majjhima Nikaya, there is a sutta where the Buddha said, when a person develops the Aryan Eightfold Path fully, at the same time, he develops the 4 Satipatthana fully. And at the same time, the 4 Iddhipada also go to full development. And the 4 right efforts, Samappadana, and then the 4 Bala, the 4 powers, and the 5 Bala, and the 5 Indriya, the 5 powers and the 5 faculties go to completion. And the 7 Bojjhanga also fully developed, and the Aryan Eightfold Path fully developed. So in other words, if a person cultivates the Aryan Eightfold Path, all these things like the Satipatthana, Iddhipada, Samappadana, all at the same time are developed, You cannot say, for example, somebody might think, I only want to cultivate the 4 Satipatthana, I don't want to cultivate the 4 Iddhipada. He thinks he doesn't want psychic power, maybe. He says, Iddhipada will give you psychic power, I don't want that, I want Satipatthana. Cannot want. In fact, later I'll tell you, there's actually one sutta where it is stated, if you want psychic power, you must cultivate Satipatthana. Because Satipatthana is not separate from jhana. And that we'll talk about later.